I have had a ton of fun with the ECX AMP two-wheel drive vehicles, and one of the things that I see online is people wondering how to make repairs or replacements. And one of the common repairs that you may need to make to this vehicle is changing the main spur gear underneath the gear cover, and that's what I'm going to show you here today. To change the spur gear, you're going to need a couple different components. First of all, the spur gear itself. You'll need a set of slipper pads, which also includes a new spring and slipper pads. And to make working on your vehicle easier, I really recommend the Dynamite startup tool set. It has a nice wrench in here, comes with a number of different bits, comes with a great case. I actually have one here already out of the package that we're going to use for this. So to change the spur gear, first thing we're going to do is take off the right rear tire. And the reason for this is it just makes it easier to access the spur gear itself. Plus, you can use the tire as a tool here. Let me show you. So one of the cool things you can see on the handle is it is a ratcheting handle, so you can spin it by hand like this. Okay, there's our main wheel nut. Pop the tire off, and remember I told you we're going to use it as a tool? That's our built-in car stand. Now we need to remove these screws from the casing. And test fitting here, it is a 1.5 millimeter tip. All right, there we have it. Now looking at this spur gear here, it's actually in just fine shape. This one actually doesn't need replacement. We're just showing you how to do it for the sake of this example. The wheel nut and the slipper nut are the same size at a 7 millimeter nut. So we're going to back this off all the way. One thing you want to note too before you remove this nut is visually observe how far the nut was on the output shaft here. That'll help you when you go to reset your slipper settings. Slide the old spur gear out. Now one thing you'll notice, the slipper pads, these blue pieces, stick to the gear, and I actually caught the slipper plate in my hand, and we'll slide off the back one. Now one thing over time as you run, you can see there are wear marks on this slipper plate. They can kind of glaze over and they just don't work as effectively over time. So that's why you want to replace these at the same time that you replace the gear, which is why it's convenient that this has everything already in there for you. So here's our new spur gear. It is an 87 tooth gear, same as what the car came with. Set that aside for now. We'll open up the packaging here. Now inside this package you'll have 2 new slipper plates, 2 new slipper pads, a new spring, and a new lock nut. Anytime that you replace the spur gear, just replace all these parts. It makes sure that you have just a good optimal slipper clutch. Now one of the neat things on the ECX slipper pads is they do have this white film which protects some double-sided tape on there. So normally with a slipper pad it will sit in the spur gear, but when you go to put it on, a lot of times it can pop out just like that. With the double-sided tape on here, all you have to do is peel the backing off and it will adhere to the spur gear, so that way it doesn't fall off when it is the most inconvenient. And you want to make sure that it sits flush in there. If you have a high spot like that side was actually a little bit high, it'll cause issues when you're setting your slipper. So now that we have that side done, we'll get this side done. A hobby knife can make this easier. Longer fingernails definitely helps too. So now with that, if you didn't notice, what I did is I lined up the flat side with the gear and pretty much just let the pad fall into place. Press that in. we're ready to reinstall our slipper pads. These are not directional, so it doesn't matter which way you put them on. We'll slide that on. It may help to hold the top of the output shaft with the open gear differential when you spin this. If it's engaging the top shaft, as you can see here, it's actually spinning the axle even though the other wheel isn't doing anything. Now, as you can see, the slipper pads are on. They're not going anywhere. Super nice way to have that on there. We're going to slap that on. And again, you can see the crossing on the axle spinning, fighting me a little bit. There we go. Install our spring, and we can start to install our slipper nut. I'll have to install it the rest of the way by using a wrench. And now I can also click this the other way so that I can tighten. It will probably do good to pinch the pads into place so that you can tighten everything. Actually, I need to go the other way with the ratchet. There we go. I'll tighten it up now. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. And you don't want to compress the spring all the way. That will bottom it out and completely eliminate the need or the use of your slipper. And I had about 3.5 threads showing before. I've got about 3.5 threads showing now, so I'm now ready to put the gear cover and the tire back on too. Now, the 1.5 millimeter screws that hold the gear cover to the gear plate here is the same size screws that hold the little cover on there, and that's what you can use to make your final adjustments on your slipper clutch. When your slipper is adjusted properly, it should slip for 1 or 2 feet before it completely engages. What the slipper really does, not only does it help reduce wheel spin, but it also absorbs impacts when you land from jumps, especially if you're landing from jumps and you're still on the throttle. That's a lot of stress and strain that can go through your drivetrain, and the slipper clutch will help make sure that everything survives and lives longer. Our last step now is to put the rear tire back on the car, and as you can see here, the hex actually stuck in the wheel, so what we'll have to do is line up the cross pin with the slot. And there we go. As you tighten everything back down, one thing that you want to make sure that you don't do is over tighten this nut. You don't want to pinch the bearings in the rear hub carriers, which could potentially cause the car to have excess drag and bind. So there we have that. Spins freely. And there you go. In a few easy minutes, we showed you how to change the spur gear on an ECX vehicle such as the AMP that we have here. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.